Mark decided to pile on the pressure by announcing there were other Baptist ministers here. That's always fun. And secondly, it touches on the Beatitudes, blessing those who mourn. Mourning is something we will go through. So I appreciate that this morning has a capacity to be emotional. It's not designed to be emotional. It's designed to still be a message, but I'm aware of it. And it critically comes. The message isn't to condemn either. Those of you who are here when we do the first Beatitude know I'm not getting this right. Like, I make my mistakes and I fall short. So please don't think I'm stood here telling you I've got it all together. It's not that either. I love the story that we heard of Jesus in Mark. I love the fact that it gives an amazing insight into how Jesus views time, how he views people, how his list of what's important and what's not important runs. Because the interaction is with two people. What's happened is Jesus and his disciples have arrived at the boat, and instantly the crowd has been drawn around them. You know it's a large crowd. It tells us it's a large crowd. So this body of people expectant of Jesus, expectant of what he can do. But the story plays out and it focuses on two characters. Two characters, a synagogue leader named Jairus and a woman who's been subject to bleeding for 12 years. Two strangers, as far as we're aware. This isn't an actual description. Two strangers we're aware, born under a common theme. There's a common theme, and there's a common solution. The theme is that they both mourn. They're both sorrowful. The common connection is Jesus. I'm just going to pray again for us before we kind of get into this. Father God, I just ask that as we touch on something very personal, very emotive, I just ask that it would be your spirit at work. So I just pray that I won't use better words to bring out emotion, God, but your spirit will bring out heartfelt responses to you. So just protect us this morning as we unpack what it is you want to say to us on this subject. Amen. Each of us will have a moment where we've mourned. The truth of humanity. Each of us will. 6 years ago, on New Year's Day, I got a phone call to tell me that a friend of mine died. I will never forget picking up the phone from a friend who had heard to let me know. I was fine on the phone. I'm very good at that. I have a good manner. But when Laura came to ask me what was wrong, I just broke. No control. It was a wreck. And it hit me, and that's what mourning does. Knocks us sideways, catches us off guard. For some of you, it will be a similar loss. It will be people. Some of you, it will be a situation that's brought loss. A job. Anything. Mourning, we assume, is people, but this is deeper than that. This is a sorrow. It's a mourning of loss. I want to say something important as we start. Jesus loves you. He died for you. But it's important that we remember this. Jesus did not and does not promise it will all be plain sailing from here on. He loves you. He died for you. But there is no promise that this is going to be easy. No promise that we've become immune to the struggles of life. And it leads to something that's hugely important for us. If we're not immune from sadness, suffering, and mourning, why do we feel the need to pretend we've got it all together so often? Why do we feel the need to present that as a Christian, my life is all together? That I don't hurt, that things bounce off me. You know, I'm sad at the right times, but I'm strong. Why do we pretend? How would people look at God if they see me struggling? If they see me crying? If they see me broken? If they see me mourning? I want us to break that line now. God needs me to be no stronger than he needed my advice in theory. Which is a good thing. my name for animals would definitely have run differently, and the world would look very different. But he didn't need me then. He doesn't need me to pretend to be strong on his behalf. He doesn't need you to be strong for him. What he does need, and what he asks very clearly, is for us to be honest, to be real with where we're at, to admit our struggles. When we pretend not to hurt, and when we pretend not to hurt, and when we hide our struggles, we reduce the power of when we are healed. We reduce the effect of the victories. Only in true sorrow do we find true joy. Only when we truly mourn, as this Beatitude tells us, will we find true comfort. It's only when we're real. So we find ourselves with these two characters. The leader's self-explanatory. His daughter's dying. His reason for being there, his need, is very apparent. His daughter is critically ill. And as we find out, and as the story goes on, she passes away during this time period. The lady is possibly a little bit more challenging. Her illness, her bleeding has made her unclean. Culturally, she's unclean. She would have been shunned. She would have lived on the outskirts of society. Her mourning was a death of social acceptance, of just being present as a human. She was still here, but she was gone. These people were not looking to her. But the Beatitudes, as we know, aren't just outward. They are inward. They're not just how we present. They're about more than that. So this mourning can't just be this outward. It's got to be this inward. So I want to ask you this morning, and like I said, I've not got it all together, but what is it that your innermost being is mourning? What is it your soul's mourning? What is it the connection with Jesus is mourning? Be honest. Is it your prayer life? Is there part of you that's like, man, I miss praying. I miss being motivated to pray. Is it the Bible reading? Have you given up believing in change? Maybe there's that friend that you've been desperate to see come to church, and now you're like, no. But there's something within you that sits uncomfortable with giving up. And like I said, not asking to bully, not asking to condemn. I ask because that in that sorrow, in that struggle, that's where we find our comfort. This comfort isn't self-explanatory. It doesn't make sense sometimes. But in those places, that's where there's comfort. This is what we're told. We're going to look at the two characters. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she'll be healed and live." And then we have this interaction. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd, touched his cloak, because she thought, if I touch his clothes, I will be healed. Both of these people had very real problems. I think we can all come to the conclusion that there were real problems. Both of them had come to a big realization. They had nothing more they could bring to the table. They had nothing else to give. So they came to a conclusion. They needed something bigger than them, something beyond themselves, and that's where Jesus comes in. Jesus is approached by this father. I've obviously recently moved into fatherhood. I can't imagine that father's occupation with Jesus in that moment. I imagine there were tears in his eyes. There's a desperation in his voice. There's real sorrow and there's real pain. But then Jesus heard something bigger than those words. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. That's what he said. Doesn't beg you any of this kind of reasoning. You know what? If you do this, I'll be really good. If you would just, then I'll. None of that. If you lay your hands on her, she will be healed. In that moment, Jesus is more than the word. He sees the faith of a father whose daughter is dying. Can you imagine the father as Jesus follows? The weight lifted from his shoulders. The relief. The joy at seeing a situation begin to turn around. And I think each of us have got it. In our own lives, we have that moment where things begin to fall into place and we begin to see how it's going to play out. Get a little bit ahead of ourselves, get a bit excited. But then disaster strikes. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. The poor father. He's just found Jesus. He's just presented his case. He's shown his faith, and Jesus is following him. And this. Jesus stopped in the crowd to find someone that touched him. I can't begin to imagine what this did to the father. I can't imagine how he felt in that moment. Everything was going right. Jesus, you were doing the right thing. This was the timetable. This was the agenda. And now you've stopped. You've stopped. But this is life. This is the life we live. Each of us will know it. As I said, we get excited. We begin to see how it's going to play out. And then it comes crashing down. The friend who said, "Yeah, I'm definitely coming. I'm definitely going to be at church," rings you on Sunday morning and goes, "Oh, you know what? I got to wash my hair. Just not going to make it." And in our heads, we don't understand. We had this plan, Jesus. We knew how this was going to play out. And yet, it's not worked that way. So we leave the father helplessly stood, waiting. Meanwhile, we have the woman. Seeked out Jesus and found him. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him, touched his cloak because she thought, "If I touch his clothes, I will be healed." It's that faith again. It's the common theme we see in amongst the idea of sorrow, of mourning. It's faith. Faith to believe that there is a way out. Faith to believe that there's something more than the situation we find ourselves in. This woman was such a social outcast. Such a social outcast. If you read the texts, these situations meant that people were isolated, were away, were gone. But she was so at the end of herself. She'd run out of options, she'd run out of ways to maintain life, that she put herself back in the middle of people to find Jesus, to reach out and touch him. The truth of her sorrow, the truth of her mourning, the truth of her illness came healing. In that moment. I want to go back to something I said earlier. When we pretend not to hurt, this is us, this isn't just a woman, when we pretend not to hurt, when we hide our struggles, that's when we reduce the power of when we are healed. We reduce the effect of our victories. Why do I know this? Can you imagine the crowd when the woman said, "It was me"? These people who have known for 12 years that this woman's been defeated, cut away, separated, and she's now in the middle of them. There would have been people that didn't see before who avoided the attack. People would have gagged. It would have been a horrendously messy moment when this woman went, "It was me," because people knew this was trouble for them. So they would have pulled away. Some of them would have sniggered. Some of them would have known the problem and would have found it very humorous. But Jesus says this, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." We read this and we miss something so often. We read this and go, "Amazing, Jesus. That's what he's done." What Jesus does is makes a public spectacle of illness, because the whole crowd just heard this. Every person there, those that recoiled, those that have shunned her, those that have made sure to stay on the couch there, have just heard that she was healed. She couldn't hide herself. She couldn't hide her illness. When she mixed it with faith, a real representation of where she was, and faith, an entire crowd saw the power of Jesus. Everyone present, bystanders, those there because they wanted to hear Jesus, those there because they wanted to catch him out, all of them heard this. When we pretend to have it all together, when we don't let the world see that we feel strong, when Jesus makes a difference, they don't care, because they never knew there was a problem. She doesn't hide her faith. She can't hide her problem. And the result is an entire crowd sees the power of Jesus at work. And she gets her healing. Again, we flip back as the story does. While Jesus was speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Your daughter is dead. It's one thing after another for this poor guy. Stood in a crowd of people joyful at what Jesus has just done, and his world was just bottoming out. Can you even begin to imagine the questions that he would have had for Jesus? You were on your way. Why? If you just, the questions that we know too well, the ones that we can't find a solution for. Jesus speaks into the situation again. Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." The emotional journey this father's just been on, I would have hoped that Jesus put a hand on his shoulder as he said it. Don't be afraid, just believe. The faith that you showed when you first met me, don't let that be knocked by this. Don't let the situation distract from who you originally were in me. Don't let it take away who you thought I was in your life. Don't let the situation change your faith. Jesus doesn't do any explanation as to why he stopped. Doesn't make it easier for us to explain it. He just asked the man to remember where he was. In our own lives, as it ebbs and flows, the positives, the negatives, the sorrows, the joys, peaks and troughs, we know all of them. We journey all of them. The best day can be broken by the worst phone call. And the worst day can be lifted by a simple smile. I stand here, and I know each of you sit there in a very real truth. Too often when we pretend it's fine, it's not. Too often when we say to someone, "I'm fine," we're not. I'm not always asking for the grand, huge issues. I'm just saying, let's be honest. When we're having a bad day, get people around us. As with the woman in this moment of revelation to the crowd, the father came up to Jesus wanted to heal him. He left that day with a resurrection. Like, this is ridiculous. He went because his daughter was ill. By the end of the day, she was brought back to life. I love Jesus. I'm sorry. I love it when I order pizza at 9-inch and I get 12-inch. I love it when I'm like that. This was an ill girl who became a dead girl who is now alive and well. Pizza falls into insignificance when you consider the journey that father's faith went on. I guarantee you, he would have found situations that knocked him again, but I'm sure he recalled this. I'm sure he went back to it. I don't get why it played out like this. You may choose to decide to spend all of this morning trying to work out why you stopped. Why God let the little girl die. I think we missed the point when we looked for that. Because as we looked at with the second Beatitude, here's our answer. Jesus brought comfort to those who were mourning. These are very practical outworkings. It started in death, but through faith, it grew into life. These two people are a wonderful representation of how we find ourselves. so often. They represent the places of mourning that are unique to each of us. I'm not going to pretend to understand how you hurt. I'm not going to do you that disservice, but at the same time, I don't expect you to understand how I hurt. What I do know is we all hurt in our own ways, and these two characters hurt differently, but yet the same Jesus was there. It started by them being honest with the people around them. Through circumstance, through choice, but they were honest. There was no hiding how they really were. They added a little bit of faith that Jesus could make a difference. That's all they did, was just add the faith that Jesus could make a difference. And it was then, it was when the faith was added to the realness of the situation that they found comfort. I think too often as Christians we really think that blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. Because I'm a Christian and I'm sad, so now I need comfort. That's how we think it works. Our part in this is to be faithful. Our part in it is to be honest. It may not look how we expect it to, like the father found that day. He had a plan, it didn't play out like that. But I promise you this, when we're real and when we bring faith, it will bring changes to us and a revelation of Jesus to those around us. That's what the woman did. She didn't plan it to be like that. I'm pretty sure if she had her way, it would have been a quiet discussion with Jesus in the corner with no one else around, and he would have blessed her, she would have been healed. She could have saved herself a whole lot of problems, but it wasn't like that. Her vulnerability, her faith, and Jesus' goodness brought a revelation of himself, and it brought healing. I don't know what it is you're mourning, where the sorrows or your struggles are. But this morning, I want to challenge you to be honest. That might be for some of you where you join me. Because if you accept that there's some areas that you still need to focus. You still need to see more. Some of you, that might be where you get on. Others of you, it might be that there's people around you, and you need to let them in. Stop being strong. Stop holding it all together for the sake of looking good. Let people in. That might be you this morning. Some of you need to start being honest with God. He can deal with it. I promise you, no matter what it is you want to throw at him, he'll be okay. He's endured fairly well for this long. I think he's going to be all right if a few of us from Mariah have some issues with him. But that's how we outwork this, through honesty, through a realness of who we are. Maybe for some of you, you've done those. Maybe you've been honest with God. You've got a support network around you. You know where you've struggled. Maybe for you, it's that step of faith. Maybe for you, it's that movement to believing that Jesus is what you need to get through it. I can't tell you how that looks. I wish I could, honestly. As I looked at mourning this week, all I wanted to do was bring solutions. I wanted to be in front of that house. Where Jesus has to come in. Maybe for some of you, you're sat there knowing what he's asking of you to move past where you are. Faith is going to be taking the steps to move past it. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. It's not a clever start of a long sermon, like I said at the beginning of the Beatitudes. It's a truth. It's a promise. When Jesus died and rose again, he made that promise everlasting. He made it for us. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. I'm going to pray.